Nothing in this world was true. That was the thought I kept returning to, turning it over the way you turn a workpiece in your hands looking for the flaw. Better steel was a start. We had that now, or something closer to it than before. But a machine is not made of steel alone. A machine is made of tools that make other tools, and the first of those tools, the one that must exist before anything else can, is accuracy itself. A single true edge, a single surface you can trust. And there was not one in Iron Ridge, not one in the whole Yeon realm as far as I could tell. Nothing here is true, I said, to no one in particular, though Tae-ho was close enough to hear. Not one flat edge, not one straight line, not one thing I can measure against. I'm building on fog. The old smith grunted and did not look up from his fire. I could not blame him for that. He had spent 30 years building on the same fog and had never thought to call it that. The fog was simply the world. Files first. That was the logic I kept coming back to. A file is hard steel with teeth cut into its face, and almost everything else in the world is shaped by one. If you want to fit two surfaces together, you file. If you want to remove a burr, a casting skin, a proud edge, you file. A file is the hand's first extension into precision, and without a good one, every surface you make is a guess. We cut the teeth by hand, Tae-ho and I, into hardened steel blanks, using a cold chisel and a hammer, and a rhythm that had to be kept even or the spacing went wrong. It was slow, and it was tedious, and my shoulder ached before we had finished the first one. All this fuss for a scratching stick, Tae-ho said. This scratching stick, I told him, is the grandfather of every machine I'm going to build you. He made a sound that was not quite agreement and not quite dismissal, which from Tae-ho I had learned to read as something like respect. The harder problem came after. To make a thing accurate, you have to see the error, the high spot, the hair of difference between a surface that is true and one that only looks true. My eyes were not good enough. I knew this the moment I tried to compare two of the blanks against each other. I turned them in the light from the forge, tilted them, held them edge on, and could not say with any confidence which one was flatter. Which one's truer? I asked, holding both out. I genuinely can't tell anymore. Nobody's eyes were good enough. That was the real answer. The tolerance I needed was below what the human eye could resolve at arm's length, and I had no measuring instruments, no optical flat, no dial gauge. I had a forge, a hammer, a new cold chisel, and my own inadequate senses. That was when the girl from the corner handed me the answer, literally. I had noticed her before, the way you notice something at the edge of your attention without quite looking at it directly. She was always in the workshop, always in the same corner near the scrap pile, sorting pieces of iron and steel by some method of her own. She was small and thin in the way that means not enough food for too many years, and her feet were bare on the packed earth floor. I had not asked her name. I had not thought to. She crossed the workshop without being asked, took the blank from my left hand, held it for a moment, then set it down and took the one from my right. A pause. Then she set both down and pointed. This one's smoother. The other's got a wave in it by the end. I looked at her. You can feel that? She looked back at me with an expression that was not quite weariness and not quite confusion, the expression of someone who has learned to be careful about drawing attention to themselves. I went to the scrap pile and pulled out 6 blanks of varying quality. I had a rough sense of their order. I had made them over 3 days and knew which sessions had gone better than others. I set them in a row on the workbench and looked at the girl. Close your eyes. She did after a moment's hesitation. Tell me which is flattest, then the next, all the way down. She moved along the row slowly, fingertips reading each surface in turn. She did not hurry. When she reached the end, she went back and checked 2 of them again, then gave me the order. She was right, every time. Her ranking matched my own rough knowledge of the blanks, and then went further, distinguishing between 2 that I had considered equivalent. They were not equivalent. She was right about that too. They each feel different, she thought, or something like it. I could see it in her face, the faint bewilderment. Doesn't everyone know that? Nobody had ever asked what her hands could do. I learned her story in pieces over the days that followed, mostly from Tae-ho, who told it in the flat way of someone recounting weather. No family, no bloodline, no thread in the registry. The town called her the rat and fed her what the dogs left. In the old order, the order of blood and mandate and inherited station, a child like her was worth exactly nothing, less than nothing, because she was a mouth without a claim. She had been in the workshop because the workshop was warm, and Tae-ho had never actually thrown her out, which was the closest thing to kindness the old order had offered her. I thought about that for a while. Then I took one of the finished files, the best one, the one I had spent the most time on the teeth of, and I crossed the workshop and knelt down so I was at her eye level, and I held it out. In my trade, I said, hands like yours are worth more than any bloodline in the kingdom. I need an apprentice with a true touch. That's you, if you want it. She stared at the file, then at me. Her expression had gone very still. You're laughing at me. I have never been more serious in my life. Take the file. A long moment. The forge crackled. Somewhere outside a dog barked twice and went quiet. She took the file. Tae-ho said nothing about it. He didn't have to. That evening he moved a stool to the warmest part of the fire, not near it, at it, the spot he usually kept for himself, and set it there without comment. And from that night forward, there was a bowl that was always somehow full. A man came by the next day, one of the town's minor merchants, and said something I will not repeat. Tae-ho looked at him for a long moment over the anvil. Stool's there, he said to the girl without turning his head. Don't read into it. Then to the merchant. And you, say that word again, I'll fold you into the anvil. The merchant left. Nobody said that word again, at least not where Tae-ho could hear it. The acolyte Seo-rin had been coming by the workshop for her own reasons. She was meticulous about the veil's anchor points, and the forge sat near one of them, and she liked to check it while she was in the district, but she started staying longer. I noticed her one afternoon sitting beside the girl with a piece of charcoal and a flat stone, drawing marks. This mark is 3, she said. If you can write the number, Yeong, one day you can write down exactly how true a thing is, forever. The girl Yeon, I had her name now, Cho Yeong, looked at the mark for a moment. So other people can feel it too, she said, even if their hands can't. Seo-rin paused, and something moved in her expression that I could not quite name. Yes, she said, exactly that. 2 people the old order had no use for, building the new one between them. I did not interrupt. I went back to my files. The 3-plate method. I had been putting off explaining it because explaining it meant committing to it, and committing to it meant acknowledging how much depended on it going right, but there was no more putting it off. To build any machine worth building, I needed a perfectly flat reference surface, a surface plate, a datum, the thing everything else would be measured against. And there was not one in Iron Ridge, there was not one in the Yeon realm, there was not one anywhere in this world that I knew of. You cannot find flatness, you cannot buy it, or pray for it, or inherit it. You have to make it, out of nothing, with no flat thing to start from. And there is a way. I sketched it in the ash beside the forge, 3 rectangles labeled in my rough approximation of the local script, arrows showing the rotation sequence. 3 plates, I said. Tae-ho was watching, arms folded. Yeong was watching from her stool. Rub them together, turn by turn, A on B, B on C, C on A. 2 plates can lie to each other and match a curve. 2 convex surfaces can nest against each other and both feel flat. But 3 cannot all agree on a curve at once. Scrape down whatever stands proud, and the only shape all 3 can agree on, the only shape that satisfies all 3 pairs, is true flat. Tae-ho was quiet for a moment. You can grind flatness out of 3 crooked rocks, he said slowly, with no flat thing to start from. The whole modern world stands on this trick. Watch. We had no measuring glue, no engineer's marking compound to transfer the high spots from one plate to another. We used candle-soot, rubbed onto one surface and pressed against another, reading the transfer marks to find where the plates were touching. It was crude, the marks were ambiguous, I could see roughly where the contact was, but roughly was not good enough. So we used Yeon. Her fingers were the most accurate gauge in the kingdom, and she was 14 years old and had never owned shoes. She would run her fingertips across the sooted surface after each rubbing cycle, eyes half closed, and tell me what she felt. Not in technical language, she didn't have it yet, though Seo-rin was working on that, but in plain description that was precise enough to work from. Here, and here. She moved along the surface of the first plate, barely touching it. This corner stands proud. The middle's low now. Careful. That's it. That's exactly it. Again. We scraped. A hand scraper is a simple tool, a piece of hardened steel with a cutting edge, drawn across the surface to remove thin curls of metal from the high spots only. The skill is in reading where the high spots are, and taking off no more than necessary. Too much and you create a new error. Too little and you make no progress. Yeong found the high spots. I scraped. We rotated the plates through the sequence, resuited, rechecked, scraped again. It was slow. It was the kind of work that requires you to stop thinking about the goal and simply do the next step and the next, and trust the method. The method was sound. I knew it was sound because it had been proven for 2 centuries in a world I no longer lived in. The question was whether we could execute it with the tools we had, which were a scraper, candle-soot, and a 14-year-old girl's fingertips. The answer, it turned out, was yes. The nights were getting shorter. Not in the seasonal sense, in the sense that Seo-rin counted the anchor lights on the veil's perimeter every evening, the pale fixed points that marked where the mandate was still holding, and every evening there were fewer of them than the evening before. She told me about it without drama, the way she told me most things. She had a recorder's instinct, state the fact, note the date, move on. 2 more gone since the new moon, she said one night, looking out past the edge of the workshop toward the horizon where the lights should have been. We are making miracles, and we are running out of nights to make them in. I did not have an answer for that. I went back to the plates. Yeong slept with the file in her hands for a month. I know because I came in early one morning and found her on the stool by the banked fire, curled around it the way a child curls around something precious, her cheek against her own wrist. The file lay in her open palms. She had not been told to put it away, and so she hadn't. I stood there for a moment in the gray pre-dawn light, listening to the forge tick as it cooled, and thought about what it meant to be given a thing that was yours, not borrowed, not permitted, yours. She had never had one before. Mine, she was probably thinking, somewhere in whatever dream she was in, this one's mine. The first thing that had ever been hers, the first proof that she was somebody, not by blood, not by the old order's accounting, but by what her hands could do and what those hands were worth to the work ahead. In the world I was trying to build, that was the only measure that mattered. I let her sleep. I went to the plates and picked up the scraper and started again.